Hey, what's up guys? In this video, I'm gonna give you a really quick rundown of how to move, rotate, and scale objects in Blender. Now, this is not every single way to do this, as there are a ton of different ways to do that in Blender, but this is just sort of to get you up and running. So let's get started. So to move an object around in Blender, what we can do is left click it to select it, and you can see that it's selected because we have this orange box around it. And what we can do is hit the G key on our keyboard, and what that does is it grabs that object and it's now attached to our mouse. And if we move our mouse around, we can see that we're kind of free moving this cube around, and it's not very helpful because it's just kind of going everywhere and it's not very precise. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click, and that cancels the movement. And you can right click at any time to cancel any movement in Blender, whether it's moving or rotating or scaling or any type of editing that you're doing. You can just right click and it will cancel that movement. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to click it and press G to grab, and then what we can do is snap it to an axis. And the axis here, this red one here is the X axis, and this green one here is the Y axis, and then you can't see it, but we've got a vertical one that is blue, and it's called the Z axis, and that controls like vertical movement. So what we can do is make sure it's selected, hit G, and then whatever axis we want to move it on. So if we want to move it on this green Y axis, we just hit Y, and now it is snapped to the Y axis, and we can move it back and forth like that. Or I can right click and hit G and X, and it'll move it on this X axis. Right click and I can hit G and Z now, and it will move on this Z axis, and it will move up and down. Now, if we want to move this on two different axes at the same time, the perfect example would be like, let's pretend we have a floor here, and this is an object that we want to move around on the floor. Like, we don't want it to go any higher or any lower. We just want it to stay where it's at for the height, but we just want it to be, you know, over here. What we can do is select it, press G, and then use Shift as a cancel button. And what that's going to do is it's going to cancel whatever axis we tell it to cancel. So I got this selected and I've hit G, and now I'm going to hit Shift and then Z, because we don't want it to move on the Z axis. We don't want it to go higher or lower. So now it's moving only on the X and the Y, and now I can move this anywhere that I want, and it's not getting higher or lower. You'd actually be very surprised at how often you will use that technique, using the Shift to cancel out certain axis movement. All right, moving on to rotating. So rotating is pretty much the exact same as grabbing. All we have to do is select our object and then hit R to rotate, and we're actually put in this sort of free form state again of rotating, which is not super helpful. So I'm going to right click to cancel that, and instead what I can do is select it, hit R, and then whatever axis I want to rotate it on. So let's say I hit Y, I can now rotate on this green Y axis. If I hit R and X, I can rotate on the red X axis, and R and Z, and I can rotate or spin on this Z axis. Now, what I can also do, if I want to be a little bit more precise, is I can actually key in some numbers for the degrees that I want to rotate by. So let's say that I want to spin this cube 45 degrees on the Z axis. I can do that by hitting R, Z, and then typing in 45. And you can't see anything down here on my screencast keys. I'm not totally sure why, but if you look up here in the top left above this blue arrow and below file, you'll see that it says rotation in 45, and that's because I typed in 45. If I hit backspace a couple times, it disappears, and I type 45 again, and you can see that I typed in 45. Left click to accept that movement, and there we go. I have rotated this cube 45 degrees on the Z axis, and that's pretty much it for rotating. All right, and then lastly, we have scaling, and scaling is gonna work very similar to the way that rotating did and grabbing did, or moving did. And we can just select this and hit S for scale, and this does that kind of freeform scale, which actually this is kind of helpful. This is more helpful than the rotating was, but I'm gonna right click to show you that if I hit S and X, it's only going to scale on the X axis, and S and Y is only going to scale on the Y axis, and S and Z is only going to scale on the Z axis. Now, the Shift cancel button does make a comeback in this one. Unlike in rotating where we couldn't really use it, with this one, we can use it again. So if I hit S, Shift, and Z, you can see that it's scaling on the X and the Y, but it's not getting taller. And again, if I hit S, Shift, and X, you can see that it's getting taller and it's getting wider, but it's not adding depth to it on that red x-axis. And so that was a very, very quick rundown of how to move, scale, and rotate in Blender. And if you're feeling pretty good about it and you want to dive a little bit deeper, get some more options, there are some other ways that you can do all this, some that are a lot more precise. You can check this video out right here and that will get you going with that. If you're brand new to Blender and you don't even know how to move the camera around like this, I'm gonna leave that video right here for you, and that should get you going there. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day, and we'll catch you in the next video.